Hey guys, so I'm going to be giving you guys my first impressions on Renegades today, and I want to preface this by saying that so far I probably have around 18 or 19 hours of playtime, somewhere in that ballpark, and I feel like I have a pretty good gauge on what this expansion is. The dungeon hasn't came out yet or anything like that, but for the most part, I feel like, I'm pretty familiar with everything and all the systems of this DLC and stuff, and I feel pretty qualified to speak on it. The main question that I really want to set out to answer today is if you haven't played Destiny in a while, should you buy it? This is mainly for people who are trying to get back into the game or into the game in the first place, I would say, because, most people that are actively playing Destiny are probably just going to buy the latest expansion and not think twice about it. This is more so if, like, you haven't played the game in a while and you're wondering if you should get back into it or something like that. Also, this video will contain very minimal spoilers. So that said, without spoilers, let's get into the campaign. I'll start by saying, for comparison's sake, I think Edge of Fate was the absolute bottom of the barrel worst campaign that Destiny has ever had. I think it was nearly irredeemable. There's very little about it that I think was actually appealing. The story wasn't really the problem with it, is the funny thing. It was mainly just the fact that it was so incredibly tedious and boring going back and forth. Looking for the Matter Spark Ball, looking for the Matter Weave thing or whatever it was called. I honestly forget what all of the things were called, but the point that I'm trying to make is it was just insanely boring. And it's funny because Destiny is usually known for having really good and fast-paced gameplay, but it basically just kind of slowed things down to a halt. And I think Bungie realizes at this point that the whole Metroidvania thing that they attempted in Edge of Fate was a complete disaster. I'm pretty sure most people unanimously agreed that it was just incredibly slow paced and boring. And I will say that I've been really critical of Destiny campaigns in the past in general. Like, I didn't really like most of them, even the ones that people consider to be better. I think were pretty lackluster for the most part. So I am pretty critical of this game's story. But as far as the campaigns go, generally speaking, I think most Destiny campaigns have at least been playable, whereas I don't feel Edge of Fate was that way. Okay, now that I got that out of the way, let's get into Renegade's campaign. Oh, and I also feel like I should note that I'm not really a Star Wars fan. Okay, last little thing. Let's get into it. I thought the Renegades campaign was alright. That is the word that I would use to describe it. I wasn't blown away by it. I wasn't absolutely disappointed by it. At no point in it did I really feel like the gameplay was the problem this time around, which was definitely a big improvement over Edge of Fate, where the gameplay was just so slowed down by having to look around for stuff constantly. That was very much not the case with this campaign. In fact, quite the opposite. It was definitely more action packed, which, I mean, probably inspired by Star Wars, you would assume it would be, but it definitely lived up to that. There are new vehicles in a bunch of the campaign missions, and that's something that kind of made me think about how Bungie has never really tried to put very many vehicles in Destiny, which is a shame considering their background with Halo. But they did actually try to put some new vehicles in this campaign, which was definitely a welcome change. And I know a lot of that is probably just because of the source material being Star Wars, but still, either way, definitely a welcome addition to the game. So all of that to say, this definitely feels like a Destiny campaign. The missions are structured pretty well, I would say, and the actual missions themselves are definitely a strong suit. Like, I think all of them are pretty solid. I don't think there's a single one of the actual campaign missions that are bad. There's a Hoth-inspired mission about halfway through the campaign that runs pretty long where you have to fight a bunch of AT-ST walkers, essentially, in Destiny form. But other than that, I think the campaign is pretty fast-paced, and I don't really have a problem with any of these missions structurally or the pacing of them or anything like that. Now, all of that said, I will tell you what I do have a problem with. The insane amount of having to go back and forth and talk to NPCs in this expansion. Destiny has had this problem with a lot of expansions and a lot of pieces of content, seasons, so on and so forth. Throughout this game's lifespan, it has had this problem of having to go back and forth over and over and over again and talk to a million different NPCs in a million different places. And as a Destiny veteran who's played the game literally since its inception, I'm used to that. But even for me, this expansion really pushed the limit on that. I mean, there was so much of it that it actually became a problem. I feel like that is probably the number one thing that people have complained about with this campaign, and I'm no different than anyone else in that regard. It is so insanely tedious, and it just breaks up the pacing so drastically that I don't know how anyone thought it was a good idea. And some people may think I'm exaggerating, but I'm serious when I say that the 50 plus step quest, I think it's around like 55 or something like that steps for the main campaign, at least half of them are just going back and forth and talking to people. Which brings me to my next point, the Tharsis Outpost, aka the new best place to get copyright struck. So if you're a YouTuber or content creator, you're going to want to make sure your audio is turned off for any clips or streams or anything like that present in that social hub. But otherwise, this is the first new social hub that Bungie has introduced in a very long time to the game. Obviously, we had the Helm, but I don't know if I'd really even consider that a social hub, considering it's really only for your fire team, and it serves as a place to go and get dialogue, which this also does, but it's actually a social hub, and you'll actually encounter other random players in the wild there. And I do think it's a good thing that they're adding new social hubs to the game. It's something that I sorely miss as someone who used to play Destiny 1, where we got the Iron Temple and the Reef. So I do genuinely appreciate the effort in putting in a new social hub, but I will say I have some problems with this one. And the biggest problem I have with it is honestly the layout, and I know this is subjective, but for me personally, I feel like at no point have I ever really gotten a grasp on navigating this place. Like obviously I'll learn it just by having to go back and forth so much with vendors and stuff like that as I interact with the lawless frontier. But I don't know, like I feel like after spending several hours probably in this place at this point, just going around and talking to people and, going back and forth, you would think that I would have learned kind of something about it or at least have like a grasp on where I'm going in it. But like for example, having to jump up to Spider every single time, I'm like, why is this here? Like why is this layout like this? And I don't know, like having a first person social space should be cool, and I don't really have a problem with it, but I just feel like having to navigate it is such a chore. And another thing I will say is Destiny's waypointing system definitely doesn't help alleviate this problem. I feel like that's probably at least half of the issue, is that it just tells you to go in other directions half the time, and until you actually learn the layout of the social space, you won't really know what you're seeing. But all that to say, I do still appreciate the fact that they tried to add a new social space, and I think it's a welcome addition to the expansion. The Lawless Frontier activity is where you'll be spending most of your time post-campaign, and just to get into that, I want to give Bungie a huge piece of praise. Bringing back factions in any way, shape, and form is a great addition to the game, and I'm so happy to finally see it. It's something I've been begging for years. And obviously, I still want New Monarchy, Dead Orbit, and Future War Cult to be relevant again, even if Bungie thinks their story is over. I still just think having them in the game in the first place and having them be something that offers new reward tracks and stuff like that is a very welcome addition to the game that adds life to it. But all that to say, I was absolutely ecstatic when I found out that there were vendors for this activity that you could kind of align to and bring materials to and stuff like that. I think is basically how it works. I just think that system is so awesome, and it's something that I'm so happy to see. And I hope going forward that they continue to add more things like this to the game, because this is genuinely one of my favorite things they've done in a long time. As for the actual activity, though, the concept is simple enough. You're basically just going in, gathering materials, and extracting at the end of it. It's kind of like Helldivers, but Destiny. That's kind of the way that I've been referring to it to my friends. And I honestly think that it's fine. It's not an exceptional activity or anything, but where it actually gets really cool is when you add in the invader system. And for how this whole thing works, it's almost like Dead by Daylight, where you can select to be a killer or a survivor. You can go in as a regular team trying to extract materials, or you can choose to go in as an invader. And successfully getting kills and things like that will allow you to extract with materials when you finish. And I'm going to be honest, I haven't exactly gotten a gauge on how rewarding things are yet, but playing Invader is just infinitely more fun in my opinion. Like you're basically just queuing in, ruining somebody's time, and then leaving instantly and getting rewarded for it. And that's just beautiful in my opinion. The level of depth to this activity is something that I think has been sorely missed in Destiny for a while now. Like, I feel like every activity is kind of baseline. There's not a lot to do. There's not a lot to really come back to for. And that's something that this really nailed, the replayability aspect, and just getting on every day and coming and doing this being rewarding is something that I think is really good. It's something that's going to add a lot of longevity to this expansion as a whole, and I think that that's something that Bungie really needed to nail. As it's like we don't know when the next expansion's coming. We don't know really anything about the future of Destiny at the current moment, other than the fact that there's going to be a couple expansions coming. So having this replayability is really huge. There's also a new solo op activity, but I'm honestly not going to spend much time on that. I played it one time and thought that it was fine. It's kind of just like every other solo op activity, and if you spend very much time doing it, you're probably going to hate yourself. But, I mean, I guess it's good that they're still adding more to it. It didn't seem very efficient for leveling, and I feel like that's the main reason you'd be playing solo ops in the first place. So I don't know how much this one's actually going to get played, but I guess we'll see. At the time of me making this video, the Equilibrium dungeon isn't out yet, so I'll definitely be making an updated review when everything is actually accessible. And for anyone who doesn't know, this is pretty standard practice in Destiny. Usually they'll give you a couple weeks to get ready for the new raid or dungeon. Sometimes it's only a few days, but usually it's like at least a week, I would say. With most expansions, it's been at least a week. As for the lightsabers, I haven't gotten around to upgrading them yet very much, so I don't know how they are in in-game content, but I will say they're at least very fun and satisfying to use. So all of this to say, should you buy Destiny 2 Renegades? If you're someone who has enjoyed Destiny in the past and you're on the fence about coming back, I think this expansion is fun. I think that there's nothing insanely exceptional about it. In my opinion, it's a really lighthearted expansion that you shouldn't take too seriously. And if you approach it from the standpoint of you're just going to get on, you're going to shoot some shit, and you're going to have fun, I think that the expansion is fine. I don't think there's anything terribly wrong with it, like Edge of Fate. I don't think that there's anything that's absolutely insulting about it or anything like that. It's just fine. It's more Destiny, and if that's something that appeals to you, then I think you'll like the expansion. If not, like if you're looking for them to really reinvent the wheel or something like that, that's absolutely not going to be this expansion. Again, I think this expansion is best approached lighthearted for it to not be taken overly serious. And there are times where it takes itself too seriously, obviously, because Bungie's probably always going to do that. But I think that overall, this is a Star Wars crossover expansion that in and of itself is goofy and over the top, so you should come into it looking for a goofy and over the top Star Wars expansion for Destiny. And if that doesn't appeal to you, then that's okay. Me personally, I don't really like the idea of having a major expansion being a crossover, but I don't think that this was insulting or anything like that. I think it was just kind of fine. Like, that's kind of the word that I would use for it, is just fine. And coming off of Edge of Fate, that's incredible. Honestly, like, I mean, that expansion was so bad that it honestly made me wonder if I was going to keep playing the game going forward. So I'm glad to see at least better. I mean, I know it's still not in a great spot, but I mean, better is definitely a step in the right direction. But yeah, for the most part, I've enjoyed it so far. I'm definitely looking forward to the dungeon, just, getting to see how this expansion kind of develops over time. I'll definitely be making a follow-up to this in the future, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see that. But yeah, that's pretty much it.